This is probably going to be a main recurring theme with some of my reviews, but one belief I always held dear in gaming is the importance of replaying your games. While plenty of gamers like to favor that one first-time experience as a personal treasure, or the one thing that defines how much they liked or disliked the game, I believe revisiting those games can improve your experience, and maybe even make you change your mind about a game for the better if your first run wasn't very good. Gameplay that felt weird and frustrating the first time suddenly makes more sense and clicks in a unique way. Specific moments where you get stuck in the past are now moments where you just breeze through them, and in most of those cases, it starts to feel like you are playing a completely different game, and that is what brings us here today. Now, riddle me this: what do you get if you grab Machete, John Wick, Kill Bill, and a 2D art style not too different from a well-produced Adult Swim cartoon and then blended them together? You get Shank, a beat-em-up that, while coming off as proof of concept on a first run, may also be one of the more underrated beat-em-ups I got to enjoy that came out 11 years ago. And it's one game that is so much fun, I had to seriously revisit now that I have a controller and experience has honed my gaming skills. So in Shank, we play as our titular hero. 7 years ago, he had his girlfriend killed and left for dead in a fire, but now he is back, and he wants the blood of those who wronged him. Of course, facing off against an entire Mexican criminal organization means entire armies of men, women, and attack dogs will come after our hero. And that is where the gameplay comes in. You face off against those armies of enemies with your humble yet deadly arsenal. Your Shank, 2 handguns, and a freaking chainsaw, with all 3 tied to light, range, and heavy attacks. With those tools on hand and a varied moveset, the enemy is yours to do as you please. Being a beat 'em up, the most effective and fun way to deal with these people is by performing combos, chaining kills, and doing some extremely fun crowd control. But of course, this game is not a walk in the park. Even on normal difficulty, you can get overwhelmed and killed if you are not careful. Normal enemies can dodge your attacks while pulling off some of your same moves against you, and larger enemies can bulldoze right through you. And dogs, well, they are dogs. They suck. But not real life dogs. Real life dogs are awesome. This is where the skill and the fun challenge comes in. The secret in getting good at games like this, if not in general, is by learning from your mistakes, learning how your enemy behaves and also taking full advantage of both your arsenal and how enemies telegraph their attacks. Using other parts of your moveset like grapples and grabs also help against getting overrun. You can play bowling by throwing enemies against crowds of other enemies, or you can pounce on one unfortunate enemy and just wail at them until they die. And pulling this off is amazing because enemies get so intimidated by you brutalizing their one friend that they will back away, giving you an opening to take down the rest of them. One aspect I love from games like this is the small sense of escalation. The closer you get to each of the people that earn Shank's wrath, the more heavily armed the enemies become. Your enemies go from simple street thugs to nightclub security to even corrupt police and military officers, and they all carry better and heavier weapons to boot. But just like they get better weapons, you find newer weapons as well, each one working better depending on your own playstyle and the situation you are in, with you even being able to switch between them mid-combat to spice things up even further. And this is where the gameplay can seriously click more, because once you get all the weapons and you have figured out the combat, you become a devastating force to be reckoned with. Certain weapons can stagger all enemies, and assist weapons like grenades can clear entire rooms for you, so with a better handle on combat, you then are left with a far deadlier enemy, gravity. Along with being a beat 'em up, Shank is also a platformer. In between sections of fun enemy slaughtering, Shank also has to do some good old-fashioned platformer, and it is a bit of a mixed bag. It's simple enough that you can have a fair share of fun, but because of the way the art style is made, your early attempts at it might lead you to some unfortunate deaths. Even as I returned to these games years later, I got mostly stuck on them, which makes me glad platforming with bottomless pits were not so prominent through this game. But I don't mind it too much because games like these do require their share of quiet time. Too much beating up bad guys or getting into tough situations with no pauses in between can lead dangerously into repetitive territory, which this game thankfully avoids. Now, as I said earlier, Shank's story is one of revenge. He is out to get the people who kill his girlfriend, which of course means there are boss fights in this game. And they are far more fun than I remembered them the first time around. Obviously, I do not have footage of my first playthrough as I did not have the means to record gameplay proper back then, but I do recall having a hard time with them. So revisiting this game 10 years later and being a lot more seasoned with beat-em-ups and my trusty Xbox controller, I ended up having an intense and super fun time. So in general, these people being bosses, they are tough, can soak up a lot of damage if you are not careful, and they can hit like a truck. And yet, once you learn their attack patterns, time your dodges well and know where to place a well-deserved combo, these bosses become the climatic for encounters the storyline sells them as. Now, since this game is arcadey and focuses so much on its gameplay, you think the dramatic storyline of a man returning to his old town for revenge is just flavor text, and you'd be right to think so. Story is extremely light, but even then, there were great amounts of effort put in that really enhanced the experience. This game features fully animated and fully voice-acted cutscenes. They are actually so well made, it is precisely why I made the comparison to an Adult Swim show, because this is the kind of stuff I could see on my television back in the day, and they are very entertaining to watch too. Even though this is a small game made to be played for fun, it still manages to portray Shank like many other iconic B-movie action heroes that came before him. To add to this fun feeling of being in a very intense action show, there are cutscenes implemented during the gameplay as well. Other people are reacting to what you are doing in-universe, adding to the excitement or anticipation depending on who Shank is approaching in the area. It's all very well implemented. Now, don't get me wrong, this is all just part of the flavor of this revenge story and giving you context as to why you are piling up corpses all over the city, but I praise it because what it sets out to do, it does it extremely well. It keeps me entertained and it does add up to the fun. And you know what other awesome ways there is to add to the fun? Why, unlockable costumes, of course. This is a feature I sorely miss in some games that I wish were there, or at least wasn't implemented as microtransactions. You get new costumes by meeting each of their requirements, in some cases by entering a code a la old school, but for most of them you need to finish the game at least once. And I know many gamers today might question what's so good about this. Well, it is because it makes revisiting the game even more fun. Having this serious guy out for revenge and listening his wrath on his enemies becomes unintentionally funny. And in the case of other costumes, it becomes rather clear where they got their inspiration from. It's a small detail, but one that makes replayability well worth going for. Now, usually when you are done with these games and you want to replay them, very often you run into the problem of maybe losing your unlocks and have to start over. Well, that is not the case here. Once you unlock a new weapon, it's yours for good. This is why I prefer to explore harder difficulties after my first run, because it makes it even more satisfying coming back to early areas of the game with your more complete arsenal. Going from stumbling around as you learn how to fight or how to do combos, to straight up wiping the floor with your enemies. And because you are replaying the game and coming in with new knowledge, it makes the challenges of hard mode a really fun challenge. Because in hard mode, enemies hit harder, they have more health, and if you die at any point in the level, you have to start from the very beginning. Sort of like a no death mode. And I personally love this, and that is not the end of the fun for the blood-soaked ride. See, the main single-player campaign is about Shank coming back for revenge, but this game also includes a co-op campaign set 7 years before the main story, and explaining exactly why the crime family turned on Shank. Sadly, it can only be completed with 2 players and it's local only, one of the sad side effects of making your game in 2010. But because I have a controller, I decided to give the rules the finger and went into the game anyway. And the results is that it's clear it was designed to be played by 2 people. This is even harder than hard mode, but that did not stop me. You want to see the wonders of the self-imposed challenge? Try playing a co-op campaign where you juggle between your 2 characters, reviving your main guy with a co-op character while also trying to keep you 2 alive so you don't lose progress. It was needlessly painful, and the biggest brick wall for me this time around was the bosses, because again, they were designed around 2 players and at times I got legitimate frustration. But pushing through that challenge and pulling off a victory on a game mode you are not supposed to play by yourself is a very amazing experience. But I do not recommend it if you don't want to get overly frustrated. Thankfully, that's what remote play is for on Steam. Either way, Shank is a fantastic little indie game and is one of the few good things to come out of EA as a publisher. It's pure unadulterated arcade fun, and coming to a small story that is not so different from your usual over-the-top violent movies or TV shows is refreshing in retrospective. This game is a classic and I feel more than happy with this claim, and I do recommend it wholeheartedly. That's why I am also more than happy to give this game a nearly perfect 9 out of 10. If they had the resources to make the co-op campaign an online mode, it would have sealed the deal. It's a small arcadey game, but true to arcade games, it's packed with hours and hours of intense, challenging fun. This game is also a nice reminder that you don't exactly need hundreds of hours of content. I know we live in the age of the backlog and live services, and there are so many games out there that you might not even have the time to enjoy at all or for a full lifetime. But sometimes it's best to remember that one of the best aspects of gaming is being able to replay your games, because nearly all video games offer to you far more than that one first playthrough.